coward? No. Just the one who told the truth.
I came home early that Tuesday thinking I'd surprise Felicity before her girls' night out. The plant had shut down early due to a gas leak, and for once, I figured luck was on my side. I pulled into our driveway on Maple Street, noting how perfectly manicured our lawn looked compared to the neighbors. Felicity always cared about appearances. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual. Small towns like ours in New Hampshire bred a false sense of security. I could hear voices upstairs, laughter. Actually. High-pitched giggles that didn't sound like Felicity's usual controlled chuckle she used around her friends. I was about to call out when something caught my eye in the garage. My father's vintage video camera sat on my workbench, the one he'd claimed to have misplaced 6 months ago. Howard Parrish never misplaced anything. He was the type of man who labeled his sock drawer and kept receipts for coffee purchases. The camera's red recording light blinked steadily. I picked it up, examining the device I'd helped him buy for his retirement hobby of documenting family gatherings. The memory card was nearly full. My hands trembled slightly as I rewound the footage. There on the tiny screen was my bedroom. My wife, my father. The laughter upstairs had stopped. Footsteps creaked across our hardwood floors, the same floors Felicity and I had installed together 3 years ago, during our home improvement phase, back when we still talked about having kids and growing old together. I grabbed the camera and climbed the stairs, each step deliberate and quiet. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see Felicity under our wedding quilt, the one her grandmother had sewn by hand. Howard stood by the window, tucking his shirt into his khakis with the methodical precision that had driven me crazy since childhood. I pushed the door open and set the camera on the dresser, angling it toward the bed. My finger found the record button. "So that's where the camera went?" I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Felicity's face went white. She clutched the quilt to her chest, her perfectly styled blonde hair disheveled for once. Howard turned slowly, his silver-haired dignity crumbling like wet cardboard. "Drew, I can explain," Felicity started. "Can you?" I kept my tone conversational, almost curious. "Because I'm really interested to hear this explanation." "Dad?" Howard cleared his throat, a habit he'd developed whenever he was about to deliver one of his lectures about responsibility and moral character. "Son, this isn't what it looks like," I laughed. Actually laughed. "It looks like my wife is undressed in my bed with my father while his camera records the whole thing. What exactly am I missing?" "It just happened," Felicity whispered, tears starting to flow. "We didn't mean for it to—" "How long?" I interrupted. She looked at Howard, then back at me. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of family dinners where they'd sat across from each other making small talk about the weather and local politics. 6 months of Howard asking about my work schedule, always seeming particularly interested in my overtime shifts. 6 months of Felicity's sudden interest in girls' nights and yoga classes that never seemed to tone her up. 6 months, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Well, that's specific. Did you mark it on the calendar? Circle the anniversary?" "Drew, please." Howard stepped forward. "Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended. "You have 10 minutes to get out, Dad. Either you tell Mom, or I do. Your choice." Howard's face went through several expressions. Shame, anger, calculation. Finally, he nodded and headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "Your mother doesn't need to know the details." "The details?" I gestured toward the camera. "You mean the part where you've been screwing your son's wife in his bed while filming it for posterity? Those details?" He left without another word. Felicity had started sobbing, big, dramatic tears that might have moved me once. Now they just seemed like another performance. "I need to pack a bag," I said, opening our closet. I'll be staying at Mom's tonight. Drew, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I turned to look at her, really look at her. Felicity Parrish, 32 years old. Our manager at the paper mill, pillar of the community. The woman I'd married because she seemed stable, responsible, everything my chaotic family wasn't. We? I pulled clothes from hangers, stuffing them into my old duffel bag. There is no we anymore, Lissy. There's you, there's him, and there's me. 3 separate people who used to be a family. I grabbed the camera and headed for the door. "Where are you going with that?" she called after me. "Evidence," I said without turning around, "and for the divorce." That was the moment I stopped being a husband and started being their reckoning. My mother's house sat on the opposite side of town, a modest Cape Cod with blue shutters that she'd maintained meticulously since Dad moved out last spring. Ruth Parrish had always been the stronger of my parents, the one who held things together while Howard chased his various hobbies and schemes. I found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner for one, a habit she'd developed since becoming an empty nester. The smell of pot roast filled the air, bringing back memories of Sunday dinners when our family actually meant something. "Drew?" She looked up from her cutting board, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What are you doing here?" "I need to show you something, Mom. You should probably sit down." She wiped her hands on her apron and took a seat at the kitchen table where I'd done homework 20 years ago. I set the camera on the table between us. "Before I play this, I want you to know that I love you, and I'm sorry you have to see it." I pressed play. Ruth Parrish was a strong woman. She'd raised me through Howard's midlife crisis, his brief affair with his secretary in the 90s, and his recent obsession with finding himself in retirement. But watching her husband of 38 years with her daughter-in-law broke something in her that I'd never seen crack before. She watched in silence, her face growing paler with each passing second. When it finished, she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. "How long?" she asked quietly. 6 months. She nodded slowly as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "He's been different lately. Secretive. Happy." She opened her eyes and looked at me. I should have known he was destroying someone else's life. "It's what he does when his own gets boring." "Mom." "No, Drew. I've been making excuses for your father for decades. This time, I won't." She stood up and walked to the phone on the wall. "I'm calling Janet Morrison first thing tomorrow morning." Janet Morrison was the best divorce attorney in 3 counties. "You don't have to rush into anything," I said, though part of me hoped she would. "Yes, I do." She turned back to me. "Because if I wait, I'll start making excuses again. And I'm too old to waste any more years on a man who thinks marriage vows are suggestions." I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and planning my next moves. The camera sat on my old desk, next to trophies from high school wrestling and a picture of Felicity and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so hopeful. I wondered when exactly we'd stop being happy and started just going through the motions. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to my workshop behind the house Felicity and I shared. The garage had become my sanctuary over the years, a place where I could work with my hands and think clearly. Power tools, half-finished furniture projects, and the smell of sawdust had always calmed me down. I was organizing my thoughts when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched Serena Walsh get out of her silver BMW. Serena had been Felicity's best friend since college, a sharp-tongued woman who worked in marketing at the bank and always seemed to have an opinion about everyone else's business. I cracked the workshop door to listen. "Oh, honey," I heard Serena say as Felicity led her into the house. "I came as soon as I got your message." Their voices carried through the open kitchen window. "I don't know what to do," Felicity was saying. "Drew just left. He took Howard's camera with all the evidence." "Evidence of what? You having an affair?" "Sweetie, half the wives in this town have stepped out at some point. The trick is not getting caught." I felt my jaw clench, and it wasn't just an affair, Serena. It was with his father. A pause. Then Serena's laugh, sharp and cutting. "Well, that is spectacularly stupid, even for you." "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking. Howard was just so attentive. He listened to me. He made me feel special. Drew's been distant for months, working all those extra shifts, never wanting to talk about anything but work and bills." "So you decided to screw his father in your own bed while being filmed? We didn't know about the camera." "Jesus, Felicity. Even I'm not this self-destructive, and I once dated a married state senator." I closed the workshop door and sat down on my workbench. Serena was right. Felicity's choices were spectacularly stupid. But hearing it laid out so clinically, hearing Serena's casual dismissal of marriage as something people just stepped out of, made my anger burn hotter. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy Brennan, my shift supervisor, and one of the few people in town I considered a real friend. "Heard you called in sick. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Family emergency. I'll explain later. Need backup?" That was Tommy, straight to the point, always ready to help. We'd worked together for 8 years, ever since I'd started at the plant after community college. He was the kind of guy who'd give you his last $20 and punch anyone who looked at you wrong. Maybe, I'll let you know. I spent the rest of the day making copies of the camera footage and planning my strategy. By evening, I'd made my decision about the first step. I sent identical text messages to both families. Family meeting tomorrow night, 7 p.m., Mom's house. You need to see something. Don't eat first. The next evening, both families gathered in my mother's living room like we were about to watch home movies from Christmas past. Howard sat stiffly on the couch next to my mother, who'd positioned herself as far away from him as possible. Felicity's parents, Bob and Carol, had driven up from Massachusetts, clearly annoyed at being summoned on short notice. "What's this about, Drew?" Bob asked, checking his watch. "We've got a 3-hour drive back tonight. It's about your daughter's extracurricular activities," I said, setting up the camera, and my father's newfound hobby of documenting them. Carol frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see." I pressed play. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Bob's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. Carol made a sound like she was choking. My mother sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, while Howard stared at the floor. When it ended, the silence stretched until Bob exploded. "What the heck is wrong with you?" He turned on Felicity, who was crying again. "How could you do this to your marriage? To your family?" "Daddy, Don't daddy me. You're 32 years old, Felicity. You made this choice." He stood up and looked at Howard with pure disgust. "And you? What kind of man does this to his own son?" Howard finally looked up. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It just what? You accidentally fell into bed with your son's wife multiple times while filming it? The camera was for my documentary project." "Your documentary project?" Ruth spoke for the first time since the video started. "Is that what we're calling home movies of you cheating now?" Carol was staring at her daughter like she'd never seen her before. "We raised you better than this." "You raised me to be perfect," Felicity shot back. "To never make mistakes, to always do the right thing, to marry the right man and live the right life. Well, guess what? I'm not perfect and I'm tired of pretending to be. So you decided to sleep with your father-in-law?" Bob's voice was deadly quiet. "That's your rebellion?" "At least Howard pays attention to me. At least he makes me feel like I matter." I'd been silent through most of this, letting the families tear each other apart. But that comment hit something in me. "I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for this house," I said quietly. "I worked overtime so you could have your yoga classes and your spa days and your shopping trips to Boston. I worked extra shifts so we could save for the kids you said you wanted. When exactly was I supposed to be paying attention to you? You were never here, Drew. Even when you were here, you weren't really here. So you found comfort with my father. In our bed, while he filmed it." I stood up. "I'm filing for divorce on Monday. Mom's filing too. I suggest you both find lawyers." Howard finally spoke up. "Son, maybe we can work something out." "Work something out?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What did you have in mind, Dad? Joint custody of my wife, alternating weekends?" Bob stood up and grabbed Carol's arm. "We're leaving. Felicity, you can find your own way home." "Daddy, wait." "No. You made your choice. Live with it." After they left, it was just the four of us. My mother, my father, my wife, and me. The nuclear family, post-detonation. "I think you should leave now too, Howard," Ruth said calmly. "Ruth, please. We've been married for 38 years, and you threw it away for 6 months with a woman young enough to be your daughter, who happens to be married to your son." She stood up. "Get out of my house." Howard looked at me one last time, maybe hoping for some sign of forgiveness or understanding. I stared back at him until he looked away. After he left, Felicity tried one more time. "Drew, I know this looks bad, but we can get past this. Couples survive affairs all the time." "Affairs, yes. What you did? I don't think there's a word for what you did." I picked up the camera and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "To make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of people you and Howard really are." The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed in my mother's driveway. Someone had scratched "Coward" into the paint on the driver's side door. I stood there looking at it and started laughing, actually laughing. "Should have gone with homewrecker," I said out loud. At least that would have been accurate. It's amazing how quickly a family can go up in flames. All it takes is a spark and a stolen camera. Word travels fast in a town of 8,000 people. By Thursday morning, half of Millbrook knew that Drew Parrish's wife had been caught with his father. The other half knew by lunch. I'd spent Wednesday evening at Murphy's Pub, nursing a beer and letting the regulars draw their own conclusions from my presence there on a weeknight. Murphy's was the kind of place where the bartender knew everyone's drink and half their secrets. It didn't take long for people to start asking questions. "Heard your old man's been spending a lot of time at your place lately," said Pete Morrison, Janet's husband, and the town's unofficial gossip coordinator. "Not anymore," I replied, taking a sip of my beer. "Everything okay at home?" I looked at him for a long moment. Define okay. That was all it took. By closing time, the story had grown legs and started running. Small towns are like that. Whisper something at one end of Main Street, and it's shouted from the other end by dinner time. Thursday night, I was in my workshop when I heard someone trying to break in through the back door. The lock rattled. Then I heard the distinctive sound of a credit card being slid between the door and the frame. I grabbed a wrench from my workbench and waited. The door opened slowly, and Howard's silhouette appeared in the doorway. He had a flashlight in one hand and was looking around for something, probably the camera. "Looking for something, Dad?" He spun around, the flashlight beam hitting me in the eyes. "Drew, I didn't think you'd be here this late. It's my workshop. Where else would I be?" He lowered the flashlight. "I just wanted to talk." Talk? Or retrieve the evidence? Both, I guess. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Son, we need to figure out how to handle this situation." "Handle it?" I set down the wrench and crossed my arms. "The situation is handled, Dad. You screwed my wife, I caught you, and now everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Seems pretty straightforward to me. People are talking. People should be talking. What you did is worth talking about." Howard moved closer, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You don't understand what this is doing to me. To my reputation." "Your reputation?" I laughed. "What about my marriage? What about Mom's life? What about the 38 years she wasted on you? Your mother will get over it. She always does." That's when I snapped. I grabbed Howard by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the workshop wall. Tools rattled on their hooks, and his flashlight clattered to the floor. "She always gets over it?" I was inches from his face now. "Is that what you tell yourself every time you cheat on her? Every time you lie to her? That she'll just get over it? Drew, let me go." "You know what, Dad? I don't think your back's going to hold up much better than your marriage did." I pressed him harder against the wall. 38 years of marriage, and you threw it away for 6 months with my wife. Was it worth it? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a selfish old man who thinks the world owes you happiness, no matter who gets hurt in the process. I released him and stepped back. Howard straightened his shirt, trying to recover some dignity. "If you try to break in here again," I said quietly, "I'll make sure that video gets sent to every person in your address book. Your poker buddies, your church group, your volunteer fire department friends, everyone." Howard picked up his flashlight and headed for the door. As he reached for the handle, he turned back. "You can't keep punishing us forever. Watch me." After he left, I went outside and found a "for sale" sign in my neighbor's yard. I borrowed it and zip-tied it to Howard's car windshield with a modification. "For sale dignity. Already gone cheap." Friday morning brought a new development. Felicity showed up at the plant during my lunch break wearing her best dress and the perfume I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. "We need to talk," she said, sliding into the booth and across from me at the diner across from the plant. "I thought we covered everything pretty thoroughly the other night." "Drew, please, I know I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. What you did was a choice. Multiple choices over 6 months." She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "I can make this right. We can start over, go to counseling, maybe take a vacation somewhere." I pulled my hand away. "With what money? I'm not paying for a vacation to celebrate your affair." "It wasn't an affair, it was—" "What? True love? A spiritual connection? Help me understand what you call 6 months of screwing my father in our bed." Tears started flowing again. "You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What if I told you I was thinking about leaving Howard? That I realized it was you I really wanted?" "I'd say you're about 6 months too late for that conversation." "Drew, no, Felicity. You don't get to have both of us. You don't get to keep me as backup while you figure out if Howard's worth destroying your life for." I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "What about our house? Our life together? Everything we built? You mean everything I built while you were building something else with my father?" I left her sitting in the booth and went back to work. But I couldn't concentrate. Every time I looked at my phone, I expected to see a message from her, or from Howard, or from one of their friends trying to mediate. Instead, I got a text from Tommy. Heard Serena Walsh was asking questions about you at the bank today. Thought you should know. Serena, Felicity's loyal friend and confidant. I'd been wondering when she'd make her move. That evening, I found out. I came home to find Serena's BMW in my driveway and my front door standing open. I could hear voices inside. Serena and someone else. I walked in to find Serena in my living room with a man I didn't recognize, going through my desk drawers. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. Serena spun around, looking guilty for the first time since I'd known her. "Drew, we were just breaking into my house?" "The door was unlocked," the man said. He was tall, thin, wearing an expensive suit that screamed lawyer or insurance adjuster. "No, it wasn't." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?" "My name is Richard Paulson. I'm a private investigator working for Mrs. Parrish." "Which Mrs. Parrish? I know two, and they both hate each other right now." "Felicity Parrish. She hired me to retrieve certain personal property." "You mean the camera?" Serena stepped forward. "Drew, be reasonable. That video could destroy lives. It already has, starting with mine. Felicity made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to have her life ruined over it. What about my life? What about my mother's life? Do we deserve to have our lives ruined by her mistake?" The private investigator cleared his throat. "Mr. Parrish, if you'd be willing to turn over the camera and any copies of the footage, Mrs. Parrish is prepared to make this worth your while." "Worth my while how?" "She's willing to give you the house free and clear in the divorce settlement." I looked around the living room, at the furniture we'd picked out together, the pictures on the walls from happier times, the built-in bookshelves I'd installed myself. This house was already mine. I paid for it. She's also prepared to waive any claim to alimony. She's not getting alimony anyway. Adultery tends to void that option. Serena was getting frustrated. "Drew, what do you want? Money? We can arrange something. I want my wife to stop screwing my father, but since that ship has sailed, I'll settle for making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they are." "You're being vindictive." "I'm being honest. There's a difference." The private investigator reached into his jacket and I tensed, but he just pulled out a business card. "If you change your mind, Mr. Parrish, give me a call." After they left, I called Tommy. "I need backup," I said. "On my way." In a small town, you don't need a judge, you just need a crowd. Tommy arrived 20 minutes later with a 12-pack of beer and a grim expression. He was built like the high school linebacker he'd been 15 years ago, with hands that could crush walnuts and a loyalty that ran deeper than family ties. "So," he said, settling into my kitchen chair, "want to tell me why Serena Walsh and some city boy were ransacking your house?" I told him everything, the affair, the camera, the families falling apart, the private investigator. Tommy listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. 6 months, he said when I finished. 6 months they were laughing at you behind your back. Probably longer than that. The 6 months is just when it got physical. And now they want to buy the evidence back? Apparently. Tommy cracked open a beer and slid one across to me. "What's your play?" "I'm not sure yet, but I got a tip today that might change things." "What kind of tip?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a text message from Ms. Greeley, my old high school English teacher who now spent her retirement collecting and distributing gossip with the efficiency of a newswire service. "Howard and your wife were seen at the Riverside Motel this afternoon, room 12, thought you should know." Tommy read it twice. "They're still seeing each other? Looks like it. Even after everything that's happened? I guess true love conquers all, including common sense." Tommy stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd grown up playing hockey and getting into trouble. "You know what this means, right? Means they're both stupider than I thought. Means they're not sorry. They're just sorry they got caught." He was right. If they were really remorseful, if they really understood the damage they'd caused, they'd be staying as far away from each other as possible. Instead, they were sneaking around like teenagers, probably telling themselves that their love was worth all the pain they'd caused. "I have an idea," Tommy said, turning back to me. "But you're not going to like it. Try me. We make sure they get caught again. But this time, we make sure the whole town sees it." I stared at him. "You want to set them up?" "I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves. They're already doing the hard part, being stupid. We just make sure it happens in front of an audience." "How?" Tommy grinned, and I remembered why he'd been so good at defensive strategy in high school. "Leave that to me." The next morning was Saturday, which meant half the town would be at the farmer's market in the town square. Tommy had made some calls, spread some carefully chosen words, and by noon, there was a buzz in the air that something was going to happen. Heard Drew Parrish is planning something, I overheard Mrs. Chen telling her neighbor at the vegetable stand. About time, came the reply. That boy's been too patient, if you ask me. I was sitting on a bench near the gazebo, pretending to read the newspaper while keeping an eye on the Riverside Motel across the street. Tommy was positioned at the coffee cart, nursing a latte and watching the motel parking lot. At 12:30, Howard's car pulled into the lot. At 12:05, Felicity's car followed. Tommy caught my eye and nodded. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. It's happening, I heard him say. Room 12, just like we thought. Within minutes, people started drifting toward the motel. Not obviously, just casual movement, people finding excuses to walk in that direction. Ms. Greeley appeared with her camera, claiming she was documenting the farmers' market for the town newsletter. Pete Morrison showed up with his dog, who suddenly needed to be walked near the motel. Even Father Mackenzie from St. Mary's found a reason to be in the area. By 1:00, there was a small crowd gathered in the motel parking lot, all pretending to be there for different reasons. That's when I walked across the street and knocked on the door of room 12. Housekeeping, I called out in a falsetto voice. We don't need housekeeping, came Howard's voice from inside. Hotel management, I tried again, using my normal voice this time. Silence. I know you're in there, Dad. Both of you. More silence, then whispered arguing. Finally, the door opened a crack and Howard peered out. When he saw the crowd, his face went white. Hello, Howard, said Ms. Greeley, raising her camera. Fancy meeting you here. This is a private matter, Howard said, trying to close the door. I put my foot in the gap. Private? You've been making it pretty public for 6 months. Drew, please what? Please pretend this isn't happening? Please let you destroy what's left of our families in peace? Felicity appeared behind Howard, wrapped in a motel bathrobe. When she saw the crowd, she started crying. Oh, honey, said Mrs. Chen, shaking her head. What were you thinking? This isn't what it looks like, Felicity stammered. It looks like you're having an affair with your husband's father, said Pete Morrison, in a motel room, in the middle of the day, while half the town watches. We were just talking, Howard tried. Talking? Ms. Greeley snorted. Is that what they're calling it now? I stepped closer to the door. You want to know what I think, Dad? I think you're a selfish old man who never learned the difference between wanting something and deserving it. And I think my wife is a spoiled little girl who never learned that actions have consequences. You don't understand, Felicity started. I understand perfectly. You wanted something exciting, something forbidden, something that made you feel special. Well, congratulations. You got it. How does it feel? The crowd was growing. More people were arriving, drawn by the commotion. Someone had called the local newspaper, and I could see the reporter pushing through the crowd with his camera. You wanted a new life? I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Here it is. Just don't trip over the ruins of the old one. Howard tried to push past me, but Tommy stepped up beside me, blocking his path. Where are you going, Howard? Tommy asked. Party's just getting started. This is harassment, Howard said. This is consequences, I replied. Something you've been avoiding your whole life. That's when Serena pushed through the crowd, looking frantic. Everyone needs to leave, she announced. This is a private family matter. Family matter? I laughed. Which family? The one he destroyed or the one he's destroying? Serena glared at me. You're enjoying this? You know what? I am. For 6 months, they made me look like a fool. Now it's their turn. Drew, Felicity said quietly, can we please talk about this privately? Privately? Like you and Howard have been talking privately for 6 months? The crowd murmured agreement. Public opinion was clearly on my side. You had your chance for privacy, I continued. You had your chance to end this quietly, to save everyone's dignity, to do the right thing. Instead, you chose to keep lying, keep sneaking around, keep making fools of the people who loved you. Father Mackenzie stepped forward. Perhaps we should all... No, I interrupted. No more, perhaps we should. No some more, let's all calm down. No more pretending this is something other than what it is. I turned back to Howard and Felicity. You wanted to be together? Fine, you're together, in front of God and everybody. How's it working out for you? Neither of them answered. I'll tell you how it's working out. You've destroyed 2 marriages, broken up 2 families, and turned yourselves into the town scandal. Was it worth it? Still no answer. I asked you a question. Was it worth it? No, Felicity whispered. What was that? I don't think everyone heard you. No, she said louder. It wasn't worth it. And you, Dad? Was 6 months with my wife worth losing your son, your wife, your home, and your reputation? Howard looked around at the crowd, at the faces of people he'd known for decades, all staring at him with disgust and disappointment. No, he said finally. Too bad you didn't figure that out 6 months ago. I turned and started walking away, but Serena grabbed my arm. You think you're so righteous, she hissed. You think you're the innocent victim in all this, but you drove her to it, Drew. Drew, your neglect, your selfishness, your complete inability to make your wife happy. My inability? I stopped walking and turned to face her. My inability to what? To predict that she'd sleep with my father? To psychically know that she was unhappy while she was lying to my face every day for 6 months? You were never there for her. I was working 60 hours a week to support her lifestyle. I was building the life she said she wanted. What exactly should I have been doing differently? You should have been paying attention to what? She never said she was unhappy. She never said she wanted anything different. She just started screwing my father behind my back. The crowd was listening to every word, and I could see people nodding in agreement. That's not how it happened, Serena started. That's exactly how it happened. And you know what the really sick part is? You helped her do it. You covered for her. You made excuses for her. You probably even encouraged her. Serena's face went red. I did no such thing. Didn't you? All those girls' nights that weren't girls' nights? All those yoga classes that weren't yoga classes? You knew what she was doing and you helped her hide it. I was being a good friend. You were being an accomplice. I looked around at the crowd, at all the faces I'd known since childhood. This is what loyalty looks like in Felicity's world, I announced. This is what friendship means to her. Helping your friend destroy her marriage, her family, and her husband's relationship with his father. Serena was crying now, too. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're just as selfish as they are. You're just as willing to destroy other people's lives for your own entertainment. I turned back to Howard and Felicity, who were still standing in the motel doorway like deer in headlights. You want to know what I've learned from all this? I said. I've learned that some people are exactly who they appear to be, and some people are worse. You two, you're worse. I walked away, leaving them standing there in front of half the town, exposed and humiliated. Tommy fell into step beside me. Feel better? He asked. Getting there. Turns out the only thing more dangerous than a betrayed husband is a jealous friend. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was sitting on my mother's porch, drinking coffee and reading about yesterday's confrontation in the Millbrook Gazette. Ms. Greeley had apparently submitted her photos and a full report when Serena's BMW pulled into the driveway. She got out looking like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her makeup smeared. She climbed the porch steps and sat down in the chair across from me without being invited. We need to talk, she said. Do we? Drew, I owe you an apology. I set down my coffee cup and looked at her. Go on. You were right yesterday, about everything. I did help Felicity hide the affair, and I did encourage her. Why? Serena was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the street. Because I was jealous. Of what? Of her marriage, of her house, her stability, her husband who worked his A off to give her everything she wanted. She looked at me. I've been divorced twice, Drew. Both times because I couldn't stop looking for something better, something more exciting. When Felicity started complaining about being bored, about feeling unappreciated, I saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To prove that her perfect life wasn't really perfect. To prove that she was just as screwed up as the rest of us. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You set this up. Not exactly. But when Howard started paying attention to her at family gatherings, I encouraged her to enjoy it. When she started having feelings for him, I told her she deserved to be happy. When she was scared about taking it further, I told her life was short. You manipulated her into destroying her marriage. I manipulated her into showing her true colors. Serena's voice was getting stronger, more defiant. Everything she did, she chose to do. I just gave her permission to stop pretending to be someone she wasn't. And what about my father? Did you manipulate him too? Howard didn't need manipulation. He needed an opportunity, and Felicity provided it. I stood up and walked to the porch railing, trying to process what I was hearing. Why are you telling me this now? Because yesterday, watching you destroy them in front of the whole town, I realized something. You're not the weak, inattentive husband Felicity painted you as. You're not the distant, workaholic son Howard described. You're just a guy who got screwed over by people he trusted. And I'm tired of being one of the people screwing you over. I turned back to look at her. What do you want, Serena? I want to help you finish this. Finish what? Making sure they get exactly what they deserve. That afternoon, Serena and I drove to Howard's new apartment, a shabby one-bedroom over the hardware store on Main Street. His landlord was Pete Morrison, who'd been happy to share details about his new tenant's circumstances. Behind on rent already, Pete had told me. Spends most of his time at Murphy's, crying into his beer about how his life fell apart. We found Howard's car in the alley behind the building. Serena had brought supplies, poster board, markers, and a staple tool. This is juvenile, I said, watching her create signs. Sometimes juvenile is exactly what's called for. She'd made a dozen signs with messages like, honk if you've seen my dignity, and for rent, moral compass slightly used, and father of the year candidate. We stapled them to every telephone pole within a 3-block radius of Howard's apartment. He'll just take them down, I pointed out. Sure, but first he'll have to see them, and so will everyone else. Our next stop was Felicity's workplace. The paper mill's HR department was located in a building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by employee parking and a small reception area where visitors had to sign in. She's been on administrative leave since Friday, Serena explained as we sat in my truck across the street. Apparently, word of the affair reached her boss. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who called him. I stared at her. You got her fired? I got her suspended pending investigation. There's a company policy about conduct that reflects poorly on the mill. Having an affair with your father-in-law and getting caught in a public spectacle definitely qualifies. Jesus, Serena, I thought you were her best friend. I was. But friendship has limits, and she crossed them. As we watched, Felicity's car pulled into the parking lot. She sat there for several minutes before getting out and walking toward the building. Even from a distance, I could see that she'd lost weight and looked exhausted. She's probably here to clean out her desk, Serena said. How do you know so much about her schedule? Because she's been calling me nonstop since yesterday, begging me to help her fix this mess. And I told her the mess was unfixable. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. We followed Felicity inside, staying far enough back to avoid being seen. The receptionist, a woman I recognized from high school, looked up as Felicity approached. I'm sorry, Mrs. Parrish, but Mr. Henderson wants to see you in his office before you go to your desk. Felicity nodded and walked down the hallway toward the manager's office. Serena and I found seats in the waiting area where we could hear voices but not specific words. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes and ended with Felicity walking back past us, crying and carrying a cardboard box. That's it then, Serena said. She's officially unemployed. You don't seem very upset about it. I'm not. She made her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. We followed Felicity back to her car and watched as she sat in the driver's seat, sobbing over the steering wheel. I almost feel sorry for her, I said. Don't. She's crying because she got caught and lost her job. She's not crying because she hurt you or destroyed your family. How can you be so sure? Because if she was really sorry, she wouldn't have been at that motel yesterday. That evening, Tommy and I put the finishing touches on my revenge plan. We'd spent the afternoon creating a slideshow presentation using the camera footage, photographs from yesterday's motel confrontation, and screenshots of text messages Serena had provided. You sure about this? Tommy asked as we set up the projector. I'm sure. Once you do this, there's no taking it back. Good. I don't want to take it back. The plan was simple. Tomorrow was the monthly town council meeting, held in the high school auditorium and attended by most of the town's residents. During the public comment period, I would present my evidence and let the community decide what they thought about Howard and Felicity's behavior. This is going to destroy them, Tommy said. They destroyed themselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. Monday evening, the auditorium was packed. Word had gotten out that Drew Parrish was planning to address the town council, and nobody wanted to miss it. I could see Howard in the back row, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. Felicity wasn't there. According to Serena, she'd locked herself in her house and refused to come out. When my name was called during public comments, I walked to the podium with my laptop and a microphone headset. "Good evening," I said, looking out at the sea of familiar faces. "Most of you know me. I've lived in this town my whole life, worked at the mill for 8 years, paid my taxes, volunteered for community events, and tried to be a good neighbor." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Most of you also know that my marriage recently ended under unusual circumstances. Tonight, I want to make sure you have all the facts." I clicked to the first slide, a wedding photo of Felicity and me. This is how my story with Felicity began. Two people who loved each other, building a life together, planning a future. Click. A photo of Howard at a family gathering. This is my father, Howard Parrish, a man I respected, trusted, and loved despite his flaws. Click. A screenshot of the camera footage, edited to be suggestive but not explicit. This is how both relationships ended. The auditorium went completely silent. For 6 months, while I was working overtime to support my wife and save money for the family we planned to start, she was having an affair with my father, in our home, in our bed, while he filmed their encounters. Gasps and murmurs from the crowd. When I discovered this betrayal, I gave them both opportunities to end it quietly, to spare our families further pain, to show some remorse for the damage they'd caused. Click. Photos from Saturday's motel confrontation. Instead, they continued their affair. They lied to my face, tried to buy my silence, and showed no genuine remorse for destroying 2 marriages and breaking up our family. I could see people in the audience shaking their heads in disgust. I'm not here tonight asking for sympathy or revenge. I'm here because this community deserves to know what kind of people they're dealing with. Howard Parrish and Felicity Parrish made choices that revealed their true character, and I believe you have a right to judge that character for yourselves. I clicked to the final slide, a photo of my mother, looking strong and dignified despite everything she'd been through. My mother, Ruth Parrish, has filed for divorce after 38 years of marriage. She's starting over at 64 years old because she refuses to accept betrayal as the price of companionship. I looked directly at Howard in the back row. I'm starting over at 36 because I refuse to accept humiliation as the price of love. I closed the laptop and stepped back from the podium. Thank you for your time. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation that lasted several minutes. When it finally died down, Mayor Williams cleared his throat. Thank you, Mr. Parrish, for your comprehensive presentation. I walked back to my seat, passing Howard on the way. He was staring at the floor, his face red with shame and anger. After the meeting, people crowded around me, offering support and sharing their own opinions about the situation. Ms. Greeley shook my hand and said, "That took courage, young man." Pete Morrison clapped me on the shoulder. About time someone held them accountable. Even Father Mackenzie approached me. "I don't approve of public humiliation as a general rule," he said quietly, "but sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions." As the crowd thinned out, I noticed Howard was gone. Tommy found me near the exit. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I can finally breathe again." "Think they'll leave town? I don't know. But if they stay, they'll have to live with everyone knowing exactly who they are." The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom for the last time. My mother was making breakfast, humming softly to herself, something I hadn't heard her do since before Howard moved out. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Better than I have in months." "Good. You've got a big day ahead of you." She was right. Today I was moving back into my house. Felicity had agreed to move out as part of the divorce settlement, taking only her personal belongings and leaving everything else behind. "Any regrets about last night?" Mom asked, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of me. "None. It was quite a presentation. It was the truth. People deserved to hear it." She sat down across from me with her own breakfast. "Your father called this morning." I looked up from my eggs. What did he want? To apologize, to me, to you, to anyone who would listen. Too little, too late. That's what I told him. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. "Drew? Yeah? I'm proud of you for how you handled all this. You could have done something violent, something that would have destroyed your life too. Instead, you chose truth over revenge. It felt like revenge. Maybe, but it was honest revenge, the best kind." That afternoon, Tommy helped me move my belongings back into the house on Maple Street. Felicity had left that morning, taking her clothes, her jewelry, and her car. Everything else, the furniture, the kitchen appliances, the wedding gifts, stayed behind. Feels different, Tommy observed, looking around the living room. It is different. It's mine now. What are you going to do with all this space? I don't know yet. Maybe get a dog. Good idea. Dogs don't sleep with your father. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Too soon? Tommy asked. Probably, but I don't care. As we were unloading the last box from his truck, a car pulled into the driveway. Serena got out, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a smile I'd never seen before. Housewarming gift, she said, handing me the bottle. Thanks. You want to come in? For a few minutes. We sat in the kitchen where Felicity and I had eaten breakfast together for 5 years. It felt strange having Serena there, but not uncomfortable. Any word from Felicity, I asked. She's staying with her sister in Boston, talking about starting over somewhere new. And Howard? Still in his apartment above the hardware store. Pete Morrison says he's 3 months behind on rent now. Good. Serena studied my face. You really don't feel bad about any of this, should I? Most people would feel at least a little guilty about destroying 2 lives so thoroughly. I thought about that for a moment. They destroyed their own lives. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Fair enough. Tommy finished bringing in boxes and joined us at the kitchen table. So what's next? He asked. Next? For you. New house, new life, fresh start. What's the plan? I looked around the kitchen at the empty spaces where Felicity's things used to be, at the clean surfaces unmarked by her presence. I think I'm going to be happy, I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. There are no takebacks, not for them, not for me. 3 months later, I was proven right about the power of truth over lies. Howard left town quietly one Tuesday morning, owing money to half the businesses on Main Street and leaving no forwarding address. Felicity never came back from Boston. The divorce was finalized in absentia, and I kept everything, the house, the savings account, even her car when she abandoned it at her sister's place. Serena and I started dating, which surprised everyone, including ourselves. She understood betrayal and revenge in ways that most people didn't, and I found her honesty refreshing after years of Felicity's lies. My mother sold the family house and moved to Florida, where she met a retired teacher named Frank, who treated her like the treasure she'd always been. She sent me pictures of them at the beach, both of them tanned and smiling. The town moved on to new scandals, but people still remembered. When Howard's name came up in conversation, it was always followed by knowing looks and headshakes. When someone mentioned Felicity, it was usually in the context of cautionary tales about the consequences of betrayal. I kept the camera. It sat on my mantelpiece like a trophy, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure the truth gets told. On the 1-year anniversary of discovering the affair, I was sitting on my front porch when Ms. Greeley walked by with her little dog. She stopped at my gate and smiled. How are you doing, Drew? Better than expected. Good. You know, I've been thinking about what happened last year, and I've come to a conclusion. What's that? Some people think revenge is a dish best served cold, but I think the truth is a dish best served hot, fresh, and in front of everyone. She was right. I came home early, heard laughter, and found the punchline. Turns out, I'm the one telling the jokes now.